Hi, I'm home today because I'm still recovering from COVID. Mostly better, but still testing positive. So I didn't want to go to the Romemu Center. So here I am.
רפואה שלמה.
Thank you so much. Just putting this on gallery. So I don't know if people are actually at the Romemu Center. I hope to find out soon. Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see people. I missed you last week or maybe 2 weeks. I don't remember. Okay, so we have a really rich parsha this morning and endlessly rich, almost frustratingly rich. But I find that if you decide to dive in any one place, you kind of find the whole, if you know what I mean. So I think that's okay. All right, so let's dive right in with this morning's Torah blessing. Alana, would you like to recite the Torah blessing this morning?
I'm sure.
Great.
Bruchat at ya Eloheinu mekor hachayim asher kichatnu b'mitzvotav v'tzivatnu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen, amen. Blessed are you, sacred source of the universe, sacred mother of all, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to soak in your divine wisdom. Amen. Okay, so this morning it's Jacob wrestling with the angel. Couldn't resist. There are other parts of the parsha which are also very rich, but the wrestling scene is so evocative and literally rich and resonant that I kind of had to go there. And let's just think about Jacob for a minute before we dive into the text. So Jacob left home. Good morning. Good morning. I see all kinds of boxes, screens becoming alive. Yeah, sorry, just troubleshooting some technical stuff. Okay, I think we're okay. So Jacob, as we recall, cheated his brother out of the blessing of the elder. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but just sort of to sum things up, his brother was heartbroken and wanted to kill him. His mother told him that your brother wants to kill you and basically sent him from home. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to troubleshoot something right now. That's why my mind is going somewhere else. I'm hoping that someone is at the Romemu Center helping people over there tune into this session. In any case, so he leaves home. He has this, profound dream about angels going up and down a ladder, and then he meets his wife or wives to be and settles in his father-in-law's house, Lavan, for 20 years. And then as soon as he reemerges, he faces the fear of his brother, right? He faces what he left behind and what he's avoided and run away from all these years, which is facing his brother and facing his brother's murderousness. He is absolutely terrified. So that's where we're entering our story, and I will share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. That's not good. Gil, save me, please.
Yep. Can you share now?
Let's try. There we go. Yes, thank you so much. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I call this avoidance, encounter, and transformation. And let me just say something about each of these words. So I think, when we avoid something, it almost like it follows us. And Rabbi David talked about this a little bit last night until we kind of turn to face it, right? And we, like Jacob, or at least my experience is, you can avoid something for years, decades, right? And then it keeps following you. And then maybe if you have the courage at some point, you turn around to face it. The encounter can be partial or full. And the transformation, I think we all hope for complete transformation, but as in Jacob's case, it is partial and continuing, right? So perhaps it's a practice of transformation as opposed to one encounter and then transformation, right? Yaakov becomes Israel and then becomes Yaakov and then becomes Israel and becomes Yaakov. And I remember like first noticing that as an adult, and I was like so disappointed. Like Jacob became Israel, and now he's Yaakov again. What's going on here? But I'm so aware in this stage of my life that progress is not linear. That progress is almost circular or spirals, and you go forward, you go back, forward. So, with that in mind, let's look at Jacob's process, continuing our and continue to reflect on our own. Okay, so here we are. Jacob is leaving Lavan's house. And this is all in the way of background, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it except for some pivotal verses, and then spend a lot of time digging into the language of the actual encounter with the angel, with the malach, or the ish, the man. Okay, so vayashkem Lavan baboker vayinashek levanav ulivnotav v'yivarech ethem vayalech vayashav Lavan limkomo. So finally, after some sort of fraught moments and conflicts, there's a sort of peaceful goodbye. And early in the morning, Lavan kissed his sons and daughters and bade them goodbye. Then Lavan left on his journey homeward. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, I have to deal with this. Okay. Victor? Hi, I'm teaching. Okay, Gil, if you could be in touch directly with Victor, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, I'm going to turn my phone off. I apologize for that. Okay. But okay, so Lavan kissed his sons and daughters, bade them goodbye. Then Lavan left on his journey homeward. Yaakov halach ledarko, and Jacob went on his way. What happens immediately? Vayefga'u vo malachei Elohim. Messengers of God encountered him. So remember, he left Lavan's house. He left home 2 decades ago, right? Left home. He had that dream about angels going up and down. And now he enters Lavan's house, and he emerges from Lavan's house. And immediately, we're told messengers of God encountered him. Almost like, like sort of ran into him. It was interesting. So when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he named that place Machanayim, or double camp, right? Machanayim, 2 camps. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav echav arza seir stay Edom. Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esav in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And it's interesting that Edom has now become a country, because remember that in the scene where Esav sells his birthright, he wants Jacob's soup, ha'adom hazat, right? That red stuff. So that Edom seems to be following them here in the name of a place. And instructed them as follows: "Thus shall you say to my lord Esav, okay, we can hear all kinds of noise in the background. No, can we silence the room? Is that the RC?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Hamrun Ladoni Esav Ko Amar Abdecha Yaakov Im Lavan Garti ve'echar ad ata. Thus shall you say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I stayed with Lavan and remained until now. So that's interesting. I stayed with Lavan, right? I lived with Lavan, the echar, and either I was late until now, or something about being backwards facing. And I think that's significant because you'll see in a moment how many times the word to face or to face forward comes up. Okay.
Confront.
Excuse me?
Confront.
Confront. Great. I like that. Thank you. Vayhi li shur v'chamor tzon ve'eved v'shivcha v'eshlecha lahagi ladoni l'mso chen beinecha. I've acquired cattle, asses, sheep, and male and female slaves, and I send this message to my Lord in the hope of gaining your favor. I want you to like me, right? After all that's happened and it's been said and done, I want you to like me. But Yeshuvu hamalachim el Yaakov lemor banu el achicha el Esav v'gam holech l'katcha v'arba me'ot ish imo. The messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esav. He himself is coming to meet you, and his retinue numbers 400 men, right? 400 men are with him. Oh my God, that's an army. So this, obviously terrifies Jacob. Vayira Yaakov me'od, and he's terrified. Vayetzer lo. In his anxiety or in his sort of constriction, one could also say. What does he do? Vayachatz et ha'am asher ito. And he divides the nation that is with him. Right? He divides them in half. Ve'et hatzon ve'et habakar ve'et hagmalim l'shnei machanot. And the sheep and the cattle and the camels into two camps. And he says, Vayomer im yavo Esav el hamachaneh hachat v'ikahu v'yah hamachaneh hanishar lipleta. He says, if Esav comes to one of the camps and strikes it, then the second one will be for a remnant or will have escaped, right? So his first response to the news of Esav coming with 400 men is to split, right? To split everything he has, and in that way to ensure survival. That's his defense. Okay, I'm going to go on to a certain point because I want to get us all this background. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and then I will take comments in a few minutes. Okay. So now let's talk about this idea of confronting or facing. Vayalen sham balayla hahu vayikach min haba biyado mincha le'esav achiv. So after spending the night there, he selected from what was at hand these presents for his brother Esav. So he will send Esav continual presents. I'm gonna skip a little bit and go to 17. Vayiten biyad avadav eder levado. Sorry about the barking. Vayomer el avadav ivru lefanai v'revach tasimu ben eder uben eder. Then he put in the charge of his servants drove by drove, and he told his servants, go on ahead and keep a distance between droves. And I've just bolded every form of the word facing or in front of. V'yitzavet harishon le'mor ki yifkashcha Esav achi v'she'elcha le'mor lemi ata v'ana telech ulemi ele lefanecha. Right? He instructed the one in front as follows: when my brother Esav meets you and asks you, who's your master? Where are you going? Whose animals are these ahead of you? You shall say to your you shall answer your servant, your servant Jacob's minchahi. They are a gift sent to my lord Esav. Shalucha la'adoni le'esav. V'hinei gam hu acharenu. And Jacob himself is right behind us. ויצב גם את השני, גם את השלישי, גם את כל ההולכים אחרי העדרים לאמור, כדבר הזה תדברום אל עשיו במוצאכם אותו. Similar instructions to the second one and the third and all the others who follow the droves, namely, thus and so shall you say to Esav when you reach him. Va'amartem, gam hine avdecha Yaakov achareinu. You shall add, and your servant Jacob himself is right behind us. Ki amar achapra panav b'mincha. For he reasoned, if I propitiate him with presents in advance, haholechet lifanai, va'acharechen er'eh panav ulai yisa panai. And then face him, perhaps he will show me favor, or perhaps he will lift my face. And look at how many times some version of face is used in this verse in particular, in verse 21. And so the gift went on ahead while he remained in camp that night. Okay, so this is the lead up to the wrestling. And I want to read this by Rachel Annisfeld, and then we'll get into the wrestling. Okay, can someone read this? Beth, would you read? Just because I see your face. What does it mean to be Yaakov? By Rachel Annisfeld.
I want to begin with where Yaakov was before this encounter, with what it meant to be a Yaakov in the world up to this point. It meant to be a heel grabber, to be a person who feels like they are behind someone else, bent over and holding on to the heel, and the very bottom of the person in front of them, a lowly secondary position, a feeling of inherent insecurity and neediness, of not really belonging or having a place of one's own. To be a Yaakov meant to be a person who does not feel sufficiently powerful to ask for what he needs, but tries to wheedle it out of others in backwards ways, hiding and dressing up as someone else, not secure in his own right to exist and to be loved and blessed. It meant to feel small. Katonti, Yaakov says to God just before this encounter. I feel small. A beautiful sentiment, yes, but also a sad one. I feel too small to deal with my brother, too small to deal with my life. I don't feel powerful and confident. Perhaps it was out of this cry of smallness that God decided to send Yaakov an angel to fight with, so that somehow through the struggle, he would begin to know his own strength and power and the fullness of his capacity.
Thank you so much, Beth. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. Gil, can we quiet that doorbell? Is that possible? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, I see one hand up. Amy.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Shabbat shalom. So, as a former undercover agent for the Department of Agriculture, I became very interested in this whole concept of the rods and the dividing of the wealth, and him putting the rods in the trough, so on and so forth. So I did some research on it, and I came to the Zohar, and the Zohar asks the question that I think sort of changes my life quite a bit, which is, did God choose Jacob, or did Jacob choose God? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or is it not a matter of God choosing an individual? We know that God chose the Jewish people, but as an individual, does he choose us individually? The guy next door to me may not be religious, and I am. So, why? That was my question. So, you have a thought on that one?
Amy, I'm just laughing because that's such a huge question. So I don't think I can respond to it in the sort of breadth of it, but I will say at least one thought.
Mm.
I once taught a class called The Character of Chosenness. Now, if you think about Jacob as opposed to Esau, he's not morally superior in any way. In fact, one could say the opposite. But what he is forward-looking. He's a strategist from the very beginning. He has his eye on the prize. And in that way, I think, and maybe not attractively so, he is aligned with God and God's vision in terms of establishing a people, sort of breaking through the status quo to establish a people. So that's my thought for now. But I think is a really big question. And maybe the answer is both. Maybe the answer is both. So I want to pick up a few things in the chat. And one is what Alana said. The term splitting is also a psychological defense. Absolutely true. And Daniel, I think this is really helpful, your comment. It reflects also division within himself. Absolutely. Different sides of his personality that he finally confronts, the twinness, the two camps, the two encounters with Malachim, and the fight with the unspecified entity, right? And yes, we will see the ambiguousness of pronouns when we get into that. So all this doubling, and then what does wholeness look like as he emerges from all that doubling? Thank you. Okay, Jay, and then we're going to go back to the text. And let me just say a few things which I forgot to say earlier on. First of all, as I always say, please try to keep your comments concise so we can hear a lot of voices. And I may not get to everybody. That's just the way it is. So I'm sorry if that happens. I really do my best. Okay, Jay.
I was struck by Vayifgu Bo in his second encounter with angels. The first encounter was in a dream. This is a physical encounter. Not only is it a physical encounter, but I think Livgot has both almost like a physical touching connection and also, at least in modern Hebrew, a connotation of possible injury. And I'm thinking to injure someone, like with an insult or something. So this is almost an interesting foreshadowing of the wrestling scene, the next meeting.
Absolutely. And let me just say one thing about the use of that verb. I think in the previous use of it, when he emerges from home and before he goes into Lavan's house, it says Vayifga b'makom, like he encounters or almost hits the place. I don't think he Vayifga b'malachim, that he hits the angels there. The verb is specifically used for encountering the place, unless there's another use of that verb in that sort of passage. Look it up, Jay. Look it up, okay? Okay, looks like we're gonna go on. And hello, welcome to the people in the room. I'm sorry about any confusion or mix-up today. It's great to see you.
I think it says Vayifgeu bo malachi.
Here it does. What I'm talking about, Jay referred to the previous use of the verb.
That was makom. Yeah, this one is
that's makom.
panim al panim.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and I think this second instance is the foreshadowing of the wrestling too. That's what was my point.
Absolutely. Okay, so in the room, Jeremy, Batya, and someone else who's waving who I can't make out. But anyway.
Rather than there are 8 of us here in the room.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. I'm so sorry to miss you in person. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. There we go. So just try to get rid of the chat here. Okay. Okay, so here he separates from everything he has. Vayakam balayla hahu. I'm sorry, balayla hu. Vayikach et shtei nashav, et shtei shivchotav, et achad asar yiladav, v'ya'avor et ma'avar yabok. So he rose during that night. He took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children to cross the Yabok crossing. V'kachem Yavirem et hanachal, v'ya'aver et asher lo. He took them and brought them across the river. He brought across what belonged to him. There's some confusion, like is he going across multiple times? And it's not really clear, but I'm not going to get into that. I think the important thing right now is Vayivater Yaakov Levado, and Jacob was left alone. Right? He's separated from everything he had and everything he knew. Vayavek ish imo ad alot hashachar, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. So here's this word vayavek, this wrestling word, which is really fascinating because even though it's not spelled like Yaakov, it has the same sounds as Yaakov, right? Vayavek. There are all these things like Yabok, right? Let's go back to Yabok here. Oh, it's not there. I guess it'll come up in a minute. There are all these occurrences in this passage of sounds that are resonant with Jacob's name, right? Which is interesting because it's almost like a crescendo, right? Of, Yaakov, Yaakov, Yabok, Yabok, He'avko, like wrestling crescendo that will sort of be, the passage is punctuated by sounds of his names, and the crescendo will be the emergence into becoming Yisrael. Oh, and also note that this passage, the time of the passage will go from night until dawn, and also from darkness until light. Vayar kilo yacholo. So he saw that he could not against him. He had not the capacity to win in the wrestling match. Best him. Thank you. Excellent. Vayigah bekaf yirecho. And Daniel mentioned before that there are all these references. We don't know who's who. Well, what's happening? We find out because we work backwards, but the absence of name is really instructive and also happens in other encounters between human beings and God. Like you don't know who's who, right? There's this almost merging of identities here. So he saw that he could not best him. So who saw? So it seems to be the Ish, the man. So far, he's just called an Ish, a man. And then the man, Vayiga, right? And that's also, the same verb as Jay was talking about before, to encounter or to wound, right? He hit, maybe. Here it says he wrenched bekaf yerecho, Jacob's hip at its socket. Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov. So he almost uprooted, he dislocated, right, Jacob's hip. Havko imo, in their wrestling. Okay, 27. Vayomer shalcheni ki Allah hashachar. So set me free. He said, set me free because the dawn is coming up, or the sun is coming up. Vayomer, and he said, lo ashalechacha ki im berachtani. I will not set you free unless you bless me. So here we have such an echo of, the sort of originating drama and trauma with Jacob's father, Yitzchak, right? Asking for a blessing. But the last time he asked for a blessing, it was not as himself, it was as an imposter, right? As his brother. Verse 28. Vayomer elav ma shemecha. So what is your name? Vayomer Yaakov. And he said, Jacob. So this time he is answering that same question of who he is, but honestly, he is Jacob. And as soon as he answers that he is Jacob, what happens? Vayomer lo Yaakov ye'amer. Don't, Yaakov will not be said anymore. Lo ye'amer shemcha, will not be your name, will not be said as your name anymore. Ki im Yisrael, but for Israel, right? Israel will now be your name. Why? Ki sarita im Elohim v'im anashim v'tucha, because you have wrestled with gods and human beings or men, and you can. Love that. But also note that Yisrael is, here's another polarity or another, sort of doubling, because Yaakov means crooked. And if you think about Yaakov as meaning heel, that's the crooked or, rounded part of our bodies. And Yisrael means yashar, being straight with God. So the crooked one has now become straight with God. And another way to see it is he's emerged from this inauthentic identity, right, to being who he is. Vayish'al Yaakov, Vayomer Hagida Nashemecha. And Yaakov asks, tell me what your name is. Vayomer Lama Zetish'al Shmi. He says, why are you asking me my name? V'yivarech oto sham. And he blessed him there. V'yikra Yaakov Shem Hamakom Peniel, and Yaakov named that place Peniel, so facing God, one could say. Ki ra'iti Elohim panim el panim. Why? Because I have seen God face to face. V'tinatzel nafshi, and my life has been saved or spared. Okay, now let's look at this last verse, which I think is so beautiful and so rich. Vayizrach lo hashemesh, and the sun came up for him. It's not just that the sun rose, the sun came up for him. There's an illumination here. There's a personal illumination, right? Ka'asher avar et Penuel, as he passes Penuel, again, a name that evokes facing God. V'hut solea al yirecho, and he is limping, right? He is limping on his hip, or he's limping, right? So what's really interesting is that in the passage, Jacob starts off as Jacob as the crooked one. So internally he's crooked, but then he emerges as Yisrael, but he's whole of body. And then he emerges as Yisrael, the one who's straight with God, but his body is now moving in a crooked way because he's limping, right? So there has been that kind of transformation. So there's all kinds of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful commentary that we're going to look at some of it, but I will now open things up to you to hear some of your comments. Okay, Alana, and then Nehemiah and Daniel. And again, please do your best to keep things concise. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Alana.
I was thinking about his wrestling and asking for the blessing, like as this is happening right before he's about to meet his brother. That is this also maybe him identifying a little bit more with his brother's experience when his brother can't get the blessing from his father and is sort of begging for that. And perhaps this puts him into more humility or understanding of his brother's role so that when they do meet, they can come together again.
I think that's beautiful. So that he's almost putting himself into that place of helplessness of like, will you give this to me? Can you, yeah.
Right, and the naming, because he took a different name in taking the blessing, and then when his brother comes back, he's like, I am your son, and sort of claiming his own name. And I don't know, I saw that parallel. I'm just sort of,
yeah, no, I love that. I absolutely love that. And we'll see in a minute, and many people say, like, in some way, he is struggling with his past. He's struggling with the ministering angel of his brother. Like, he's struggling with what he did to his brother and with his brother in some way. So I like that a lot. Thank you. Okay, so I think I said Nehemiah and Daniel, Miriam, Richard.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Always, when I speak to God or when I call to the bima, I say, blessed are you, the Lord, who always choose us to the extent that we choose you. No merits from past parents. It's my work, it's our work. And the oldest thing about the chosen one is very similar to what all religions do. Muslims tell me they are the best, Christians tell me they are the best. This is the compromise with the nations to feel that we are better. So because this consolidates the nation and religion have to do that. So Jacob was chosen because even though he was mixed bag like all of us non-realized being, he had a spiritual potential inside him from his birth. That's what Rebecca was told. So he had to be with God in this one, and the word shara mean to kind of merge in the water, stay with it. The word shara can be translated this way. And as you said, they get mixed with each other. And that's what happened to us when we struggle with the sitra achra, with the ego, and with all these things. The angels of God is basically empowering them
Okay, thank you, Nechemia. And
That's
I also want to, you're reminding me that I saw that the word Sarah or Sarita could also perhaps be resonant with his grandmother, Sarah. Right, so that's interesting, like bringing her energy down. So thank you for reminding me of that, and thank you for your comment. Okay, Daniel.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
So we know that translation is always involves a certain amount of interpretation. So
Absolutely.
I love that you found, and you're not the only one who found this, that there's the word Yashar in Yisrael. And I find that Yasher El makes more sense in the context of the transformation.
Yes.
Yisra, which is struggling or striving or wrestling, or maybe a reference to being a prince or princess or minister like his mother. It's really this inner transformation. And I wonder, I think there's some evidence that there was a time when it was Yasher El. And I wonder if you ever heard of that, and I wonder.
Well, later on,
I wonder what our people would be like if it was Shema Yasher El, or that we were the B'nai Yasher El. It's just such a more dignified, integrity kind of interpretation.
Right. Well, the resonance is definitely there, so it is there. But later on in the prophets, and I don't know if this occurs in Deuteronomy, maybe someone would say in the chat, we are called as a people Yeshurun. Straight people, right? So that's interesting.
Yes.
Let me go on. Let me go on. Okay, Margot.
Shabbat Shalom. I love Yashir El, the one who sings to God.
Beautiful.
But it just struck me so powerfully that Jacob's encounter with the divine is a gift when he's young, and he runs away from it. And when he returns, it only is in being wounded, in having a disability, that he is able to encounter God for real again, to be Yashar, to be straight again. And that just resonated so powerfully with me. A lot of times we turn away from the gifts, the spiritual gifts we are given when we're young. And we return to it only when we recognize our vulnerability.
Margot, I love that, Mira Margot. And I love that, perhaps just to think about our own lives, there are gifts that are waiting for us that we received, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, and we didn't have the capacity. And now maybe in our very vulnerability, paradoxically, we have the capacity to take them in. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, Richard, and then I'm going to go on.
2 quick thoughts. The renaming, Yaakov to Israel, is a troubled renaming. 2 quick thoughts. First, after this encounter with Esau, which comes up right after this encounter, he promises to follow Esau to his camp, but then doesn't do it.
Yeah, we're going to get there, Richard.
Okay.
So we're going to get there. It's very troubling. I agree.
And then the naming is inconsistent later. So there is this constant sort of recapitulation and trouble arising out of this encounter.
Yeah, this is not a complete transformation, right? I kind of began with that thought, right? It's a transformation for the moment. And then it goes away and he regresses and then he reaches again to Israel. Like, how much greatness can we achieve? It's not linear, it's not constant. It's like all of our lives kind of.
Right. Exactly.
Uneven. Okay, I see Ellen, were you raising your hand? Okay, go ahead.
You know, I have to apologize. I am just emerging from laryngitis.
Oh, do not apologize. Unfortunately, there's a lot of illness going around here.
You know, you said something a few minutes ago, which was such a game changer. So I have a new job as the Judaic studies teacher for 5th through 7th graders at a conservative synagogue here in Westchester. And it's
I'd
really,
like to say Mazel Tov, or God help you. Go ahead.
you're right. It is really, really tough. And sometimes I think I can't do it anymore because they are so noisy, so disruptive. They don't want to be there. And I was trying to teach this last week, and the kids are like, look at us. This is terrible. We're liars. We're cheaters. We're deceivers. And what you said, it was like, as soon as Yaakov changed his name or told the truth.
Yeah, as soon as he owned his and claimed his identity and had the courage.
As soon as he told the truth and he didn't lie anymore, and his mommy wasn't helping him by, creating this whole deceptive thing with the skin and then his name was changed. So we're not the liars and cheaters, but we have to tell the truth all the time. Great, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this class.
Right.
I want to
but
be
it's
watching.
even more complicated because as soon as we own that we're liars and cheaters, then we become honest. Right. Yeah.
So maybe I'll try that with them tomorrow.
Let us know how it goes. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Alana, can you wait till the next round? Alana? Yeah. Okay. So here we are. So let's get this out of the way. What's this doing here? Okay, here we go. Okay, I love this comment. So it's just such a beautiful image. So I'm going to share it with you. This is Rashi. V'yavek ish. Okay, Menachem Perush v'yitaper ish. So Menachem, who was a 10th century linguist and commentator and poet, explains a man covered himself with dust, taking the verb as connected in sense with avak, dust. So avak and afar are synonyms, right? Avak and the word afar is used specifically in God's blessing of Jacob. Your children will be as many as the dust on the earth, not the sands of the seas, as which was the language of blessing to Abraham, to Abraham. Okay. Shahayu ma'alim afar baraglehem al yedei ninuam. Yeah. So they would sort of raise up the dust in their motions and in their wrestlings and their fighting. The liner shahu lishon v'yit kasher. Okay, so this is really interesting. So Rashi is saying that the language is actually the language of tying or entwinement. The lashon aramihu. So it's Aramaic, but tar de aviku be. So it denotes intertwining. For such is the manner of two people who make strong efforts to throw each other. One clasps the other and twines himself round him with his arms. Our rabbis of blessed memory explained that he was Esav's guardian angel. So that's actually a separate matter. So what's happening here is Rashi saying, the word v'yavek, Menachem says, is all about dust, because they kicked up dust. And the Talmud actually says in Chulin, I think 91a, says that they kicked up dust and it reached the throne of the heavens, which is really quite a beautiful image. But then Rashi goes on to say, I don't think it's really that. I think what it really is, what this word v'yavek is all about like intertwinement and entwinement, which is interesting. So if you think about this in terms of the polarities we've been talking about, right? Yaakov and Esav, sort of, in a way, not in a way, existentially threatening each other, and sort of, poles that divided. And now, if we think about the angel as Esav's angelic minister, right? Then there's an intertwinement happening between those two poles. And from that emerges wholeness. Okay. So now I love this from another piece from Rachel Annisfeld. So this goes back to Yaakov saying, no, I won't set you free. No, I won't set you free unless you bless me. And she says, maybe sometimes a strong no is required to own our power. Yaakov says no to the angel. Lo ashlachecha. No, I won't send you off just like that. Sometimes the angel inside us is asking us to learn to say precisely this no, to be able to set boundaries, to assert ourselves, to say, stop, I won't tolerate this. You can't make me small. I know my own value. No, I won't send you off just like that, Yaakov says. I demand a blessing. I demand to be loved and blessed. I deserve it. I don't have to pretend to be someone else to get it. I can be me and demand it. This is a powerful stance. Yaakov has never asked for anything directly before. He has always had to wheedle his way into it, manipulating and pretending. But now Yaakov stands tall in relation to this magical stranger, and he says, no, I won't let you leave until you bless me. I'm asking directly for what I need. I demand to be blessed. I love that piece. And I'm sort of, threading her commentary through this almost as if she is Rashi today, because I was so taken by her writing. Okay, so let's just look at Rashi on the sun rose for him, and then a piece about dawning, and then I'll open things up again. Okay, Vayizrach lo hashemesh, Lashon b'nei adam hu, keshehigianu l'makom, ploni, he'ir lanu hashachar, zehu pshuto. So Rashi says, this is an expression that people use when we reach such and such a place, the dawn broke upon us. It's just, it's like a way people speak, as opposed to, and the sun came up for him. But the Midrash says that lo, litzarko, lirafot et salaato. So the Midrash says basically that the sun came up for him, for his needs, to heal his lameness. Okay, I think we'll keep that there. Okay, now one more thing about dawning. Daniel, would you mind reading this paragraph? Daniel Berlin?
Sure. Dawning. This is not a one-time wrestling match. We will need to assert ourselves again and again, to practice standing tall and not collapsing or hiding or shutting down. We will, for a very long time, perhaps forever, be both Yaakov and Yisrael. And that is good. We need both energies. But maybe over time, the darkness of the Yaakov pain can lessen. Maybe over time, the darkness of feeling that smallness and insecurity, the darkness of feeling secondary, the pain of not fully mattering, maybe over time, that can lessen and gradually dissipate. The Torah says that Yaakov fought the angel with alot hashachar.
Until alot hashachar.
Until, hashachar, okay. Which the Ibn Ezra interprets as until the going up of the shahur, the darkness. We continually wrestle with the angel until the darkness lifts inside us, and we are filled with the light of morning. Yaakov, stepping out the next morning, saw the sun shining brightly upon him, even as he limped. Vayitzrach lo hashemesh. The sun shined for him that morning. When the darkness lifts, we find out that the world was created for us, for each of us individually. We find out how much we matter in this world, that the sun rises for each one of us every morning. And we can, even as we limp from our injuries, walk forward to joy, in the joy of knowing our own vitality and inherent value. Surely the sun does shine, especially for each one of us.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Okay, so I see Alana and then someone in the Romemu Center.
It was such a beautiful passage. My comment follows directly from Miriam Margot's beautiful insight about this opening to vulnerability. And I think about the ways in which vulnerability can also open us to compassion, and the movement in Yaakov's name from singular to plural. And that perhaps this can also be understood as his pathway to also be able to embody the name that is of his people, that he, through his woundedness, through his vulnerability, is able to open to this wider compassion that allows him to also, at least episodically, have the kind of compassionate presence that is more than just his individual light, but that he can stand with his people.
Beautiful. And that connects beautifully to Alana Schneier's earlier comment about him perhaps feeling the vulnerability of his brother, like being willing to feel the vulnerability of others.
And that also his name becomes plural too.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you
right.
so much. Right. So what does it mean to emerge from the individual, from being individual to like sort of representing a collective? And that's what you're speaking to. I love that, Alana. Thank you. Okay, the Romemu Center. Hit it.
Hi. Tony here.
Hi, Tony.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. There, and here, and elsewhere. The sun rising for each of us in particular is so rich and reminds me of several wise reference points, including Rabbi Bunam's great story about the two pockets, quoting the Talmud, I believe, saying each person needs to know that the world was created, should say the world was created for me. And there are other reference points, all of which point towards the deep truth of quote, grandiosity or pride, which is to say, each of us is the one. Each of us is Neo. Each of us is, that the world is, each morning is created for each of us in some profound, nonlinear way. And so, among other things, I think of the great Christian mystic and poet Thomas Traherne, who quotes Seneca, the Greek philosopher, who says, "I come to God alone and God comes to me alone." And one of his other comments along these lines, Thomas Traherne's, is, each soul is God's jewel. Each soul is God's jewel.
Beautiful, Tony. And I also want to connect that to a midrash that talks about Jacob being left alone and saying that Jacob is left alone and God is left alone. Like there's something about connecting to your own aloneness that somehow connects.
Very profound. That's way profound. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anyone else in that room wants to speak? No? Okay, great.
Wendy.
Wendy.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Before Shlema for you.
Thank you so much.
What is interesting in this particular parsha is, before someone was saying going from the singular to the plural, is probably like 80% of the Pasukim begin with Vayomer, and he said, so the whole parsha is like 80-90% in the first person grammatically, and it's not like a narrative. It's not like this happened. It's not like this happened, that happened, this happened.
Right.
Like about if you go through all the pasuk, you will see like 85% of it.
Yes.
Sentences begin by Yomer is the first person. And I think that's very unique in this particular parsha.
And relates to aloneness? Does it relate to I
Okay,
stay
I'm going to
alone?
send you guys off. We can't deal with the whole conversation. Well, I'm going to comment on that. Thank you. That's a really interesting insight, Wendy. And I think you're right. The narrative is pushed forward, or the drama is pushed forward just by speech acts. And that I think is unique. I think that's really interesting. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but it's interesting. It's like it's showing as opposed to telling. Right? It's really showing us what's going on. And I also I'm missing most of what you're saying in the chat, but I just want to hold up Richard's comment here that Elizabeth just reminded me that this portion is read every year just before Hanukkah, the festival of lights. The sun rising for Yaakov is perhaps a commentary on the festival, and this being the time of year when the days are the shortest. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Richard. Okay, so let's look at, and actually Richard mentioned this before, let's look what happens. Let's look what happens in terms of the encounter between Jacob and Esav after this mythic wrestling. Okay, here we go. So let's get rid of this. Okay. There's lots of good stuff on this page. So take a look at it because we don't have time to get to all of it now. Okay. Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? If you're still there?
Thank you. I was having some Zoom problems, but I'm back.
Great. Source number 16.
Vayisa Yaakov Einav, Vayar. There's something gray on my. Vayisa Yaakov Einav, Vayar v'hine Esav ba, v'immo 400 ish. Yaakov raised his eyes and saw, and wow, Esav coming, and with him 400 men. ויחץ את הילדים על לאה ועל רחל ועל שתי השפחות. And he halved or divided the children on Leah and on Rachel and on the two handmaids. וישם את השפחות ואת ילדיהן ראשונה, ואת לאה וילדיה אחרונים, ואת רחל ואת יוסף אחרונים. And he placed the handmaids and their children first, and Leah and her children afterwards, and Rachel and Yosef afterwards. V'hu avar lifnehem, and he went in front of them. Vayishtachu arsa sheva pe'amim, and he groveled 7 times, ad gishto ad achiv, until he approached his brother. Vayaros Esav lekrato, vayihabakehu, vayipol al savarav, vayishakehu, vayivku. Esav rushed towards him and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. Vayisad Einav, vayaret hanashim v'et hayeladim, vayomer me'el elach. And he raised his eyes, and he saw the women and children, and asked, "Who are these to you?" Vayomer, hayeladim asher hanan Elohim et avdecha. And he said, "The children with whom Elohim has graced your servant." Vatigashna hashefahot hena v'yaldehen vatishtahavena. And the handmaids drew near, they and their children, and they bowed down. Vatigash gam Leah viladeha vaishtahavu. And Leah and her children also drew near and bowed down. V'achar nigash Yosef v'Rachel vaishtahavu. And after Yosef drew near with Rachel, and they bowed down. Interesting reversal. Vayomer, milecha kol hamachaneh hazeh asher pagashti. And he said, "Who to you is all of that camp, this camp that I encountered?" Vayomer limsochen b'einei Adoni. And he said, to find favor in the eyes of my Lord. Vayomer Esav, yesh li rav, ahi yeh lecha asher lach. Esav said, I have enough. My brother, your stuff can be your stuff. Vayomer Yaakov, alna, imna masati hein b'einecha, velakachta min hatim yadi. And Yaakov said, please, please, if I find favor in your eyes, please take this offering from my hand. Ki al kain ra'iti fanecha kirot pnei Elohim vatirseni. Therefore, because that's why I saw your face as a person sees the face of Elohim and was received favorably.
So that's such an interesting line, right? And also keeping in mind Wendy's Vayomer, Vayomer, Vayomer. It's not all Vayomers. There are a lot of Vayomers here, and he said, and he said, and he said. But it's such an interesting line here because it's almost like Jacob is referring to the fact that he wrestled with the angel, and somehow the angel and Esav's face are interchangeable, right? It's almost like he's like, oh, I wrestled with you and I saw your face, like your face is the face of God and you've accepted me. So you could see how much that encounter enabled and made possible this encounter.
Tahnad birchati. Now take my blessing, please. Take, please, my blessing. Asher huvat lach, that was brought to you. Ki hanani Elohim v'chi yesh li kol vayiftzar bo vayikach. And this is the blessing that was brought to me because God has been gracious to me and I have everything. And he pressed on him and he accepted.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Ashacham. And what I don't have here is what happened was Esav says to Jacob, okay, let's travel together. And Jacob's like, no, I go very slow. He goes, okay, I'll meet you in Sukkot. And Jacob goes, okay, but he never shows up. He never shows up. Instead, he goes to Shechem. And that's where the terrible rape of his daughter happens. So, there's this, we were talking before about incomplete or partial redemption. There's also an incomplete sort of reconnection here. Like, what's really happening here? Is Jacob kind of withholding himself from his brother because he doesn't entirely trust him? And what's interesting is the Midrash doesn't really trust Esav, because when they kiss, the Midrash says Esav bit Jacob's neck. Like he was still almost like a demonic figure. Okay, we're going to end with this poem. I'm going to take a few more comments, but we don't have much time. So stop my share. And I see a comment in the room, but I'm only taking comments from people who haven't spoken. If you've spoken already, please put your comment in the chat. Okay.
Yeah. So, this is Elliot. Shabbat Shalom,
hi,
everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hi. So, what I'm sort of thinking about, feeling, is sort of this notion of smallness or insignificance, and also, sort of taking one's power, one's agency, and so, Jacob, when he basically substitutes himself, for Esau, it sort of makes Esau small. Jacob is ascendant and Esau is made small in that moment. And then, in thinking about what Rachel Anisfeld said, in the wrestling, with the Ish, Jacob, is wounded, but also is sort of reclaiming his power. And so at the same, simultaneously, sort of reclaiming one's power and, becoming small or, weakened in a way. And then with Esau, he humbles himself and he says, I'm coming to seek your favor. He's making himself small, with his brother, and then they embrace. And so to me, the embracing, is almost like a metaphor for an internal embrace. And that is, that we're large and small at the same time. That while we can claim our power and do not wish to be humiliated, at the same time, we remain humble.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think, I'm feeling like what's emerging from this session is all kind of like nuances. Like we can reach high for redemption. It's not that the redemption is small, but that it's not permanent, right? It's not once and for all transformation, right? And we can we can be larger. And yet when we connect with people, in order to connect with people, we have to contract again, right? We have to do Simpson. Like how do you, we have to make sure there's room for other people. But how do you make yourself small appropriately as opposed to disingenuously? And I'm wondering if Jacob is authentic here or not. And I don't know the answer. So thank you, Elliot. Okay, Barbara, Marilyn, and then we're gonna read a poem and complete the session. Go ahead. Barbara, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Just very briefly, I'm thinking about how relationships between siblings are always fluctuating, at least in my own experience. And so, we get small, we become dominant, we reconcile it, and then the next time, we're holding something from another time and it comes back and we think that we feel close and love, but it's really just a process. And I think that's happening, with Jacob and Esau. Jacob feels those thoughts, those positive feelings and forgiveness. He asks for forgiveness. He asked, and then, like you said, it's not resolved. So I don't need to repeat what everyone else said, but I'm just thinking of it specifically between siblings.
Yeah, or family members in general. Thank you. Okay, Marilyn.
Yeah, well, I started off wondering about why is it ish? Why is it man?
Yeah.
And I sort of got it from the whole what everyone said and what you brought in, which is that there's a transformation in Yaakov seeing that a man and God, the face of God, are both there simultaneously, and that you're struggling with the human, just like the small. Are you small or are you big? Are you divine? Is each person divine or are they human? And you're wrestling and it's turning upside down between the two of them. And yes, Jacob sees his brother's divinity, but also Jacob meets his own humanness and gets humanly wounded. So those two things that keep turning around. Yes, it's the face of God. It's a man. So that's
Beautiful.
sort of
Beautiful. I feel like you sort of wrapped up the gift for us. Thank you. Okay, Daniel.
Well, this is going off in a different direction, and it's just a request for reference rather than discussion, because it's a whole different story. But I was just wondering what would be, well, assuming that things don't happen haphazardly, then there's the episode of Dinah afterwards, after having gone through all of this very rich passage with Esav. So why would they be in the same parasha? What would be the connection? Roberta already pointed out, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, there seems to be a tragic connection there. The Midrash makes the connection by, where it says that Jacob took his 11 children across the river, but where was Dinah? Where was Dinah? So what the Midrash says is that Jacob put her in a box so that Esau wouldn't take her, right? Like he hid her, right? And I wonder if I don't really know, but I'm wondering if there's something about his betraying Esau again by saying he's going to meet him in Sukkot, and instead he goes to Shechem. Maybe there's something about that that ends up in tragedy. So I don't know exactly. I'm just giving you some thoughts. But you're right to ask the question, like, why is this story juxtaposed with that story?
Yeah, we always assume there is some connection that we can learn from. That's my
Yeah.
my
Let's
question.
look at the poem, because I think